Get started. I am Rebecca Blackburn-Hines. I am the CARES Act Project Manager for the SBDC. Welcome to today's webinar presented by the South Carolina Small Business Development Centers. Today, we will be walking through the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant that will open later this week. Just a few notes before we begin. This webinar will be recorded. Each registrant will receive a copy of the slides from the presentation and a recording of the presentation. I say this so that you don't get overwhelmed by the amount of material that we will cover and you feel like you can pay attention as we move along. If you have a question during the presentation, please type it into the chat box and we will try to answer them at the appropriate time. At the end of this presentation, you will receive a survey. If you would, please take a moment to complete this survey as it helps us better serve our small businesses. Just a little bit about the South Carolina Small Business Development Centers. We are a network of highly trained professionals located in 20 South Carolina Small Business Development Centers across the state. We offer no-fee, individual, confidential, one-to-one business consulting. We assist both existing and startup companies, and we conduct affordable and educational workshops, and we provide access to useful business resources. You can find us at scsbdc.com. And today on the call, like I said, I am Rebecca Blackburn-Hines. We have Paul Featheringill, who is our USC Region Director. Jim Johnson is our SC State Region Director. Ben Greenswig is our CARES Act Business Consultant. And we also have Ben Smith, who is the Clemson Area Manager and Business Consultant. A little bit about the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant. Section 324 of the Economic Aid to Hard-Hit Small Businesses, Nonprofits, and Venues Act, which is known as the Economic Aid Act, was signed into law on December 27th of 2020. This program includes over $16 billion in grants to shuttered venues, which will be administered by the SBA's Office of Disaster Assistance. Eligible applicants may qualify for grants equal to 45% of their gross earned revenue, with the maximum amount available for a single grant award of $10 million. $2 billion is reserved for eligible applications with up to 50 full-time employees. And I'm going to turn it over to Paul Featheringill, who will identify who can apply and move it right along.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here, and it's my pleasure to be speaking with you today. And so just to give you a little bit more information on this program, firstly, as far as who can apply. So live venue operators or promoters qualify, as do theatrical producers, live performing arts organizations and operators, relevant museum operators, zoos, and aquariums who meet specific criteria, motion picture theater operators, talent reps, each business entity owned by an individual, or I'm sorry, each business entity owned by an eligible entity that also meets the eligibility requirement. So if there's additional entities that fall up under your business, they could qualify as well. Now, some other requirements of note, you have to have been in operation as of February 29th of last year of 2020. And venue or promoters who received a PPP loan on or after December 27th of 2020, the Shuttered Venues Grant will be reduced by the PPP loan amount. And I know that we have a slide a little bit later in the presentation where we're going to talk about that. And another thing I wanted to point out, we are here to assist you, the SBDC, as you go through this application process. And one of the things, if you're not exactly sure if you qualify, depending on where you fall in, just let us know, reach out and contact one of us in your area, and we can help you to determine if you are actually eligible to apply. So the grant amounts, are based on either of the following instances. if you are in operation as of January 1st, 2019, grants will be for an amount equal to 45% of your 2019 gross earned revenue or $10 million, whichever is less. So again, the less of 45% of 2019 gross earned revenue or $10 million. So if you were in operation, came into operation after January 1st, 2019, the grants will be for the average monthly gross earned revenue for each full month you were in operation during 2019 multiplied by 6, again, or $10 million, whichever is less. So in other words, if you were in business prior to or on January 1st, 2019, that would be your first instance, 45% of 2019 gross revenue or $10 million. If it was after January 1st, 2019 that you came into business, it will be based on an average monthly earned revenue for each full month you were in operation during 2019 multiplied by 6, again, or $10 million. So how to apply? The application portal is going to open on April 8th, 2021. So it will open on Thursday. And basically the way they're going to take these is those who have suffered the greatest loss, the greatest economic impact will be the first applications processed under a priority schedule. So you can go ahead and submit your application once the portal is open, but they are going to look at degree of loss, degree of impact to determine which applications are going to be processed first based on a priority schedule. So looking a little bit more at that priority schedule, within the first 14 days of the grant award, this is the first priority. This is entities that suffered 90% or greater revenue loss from April through December of 2020 due to the pandemic. The next 14 days after that initial priority section, the next 14 days is going to be entities that suffered 70% or greater revenue loss between April 2020 and December 2020 due to the pandemic. And then the third priority, this is going to begin 28 days after the process opens, or I'm sorry, 28 days after the first and second priority awards are made. The entities that suffered a 25% or greater revenue loss between one quarter of 2019 and the corresponding quarter of 2020. So here they're looking at comparable quarters between 2019 and 2020. And again, this is a determination that SBA will make as they look at your application and as they look at your financials as to which priority group you would fall into. After all of the priority periods have passed, those who are recipients of first, second, and third priority round awards who suffered 70% or greater revenue loss for the most recent quarter, and this is April 1st, 2021 or later, will be eligible for supplemental funding. So that will be something to keep in mind as well that will be available.
And Paul, I'm going to jump in and ask
Please.
a question.
Yeah.
Would a dance studio qualify as an eligible entity?
I will check on that to be sure. My thought would be most likely not. If it's not a venue where you are actually having live performances that are open to the public. But if anyone else knows differently, by all means, jump in.
Okay, Erica, we will follow up on that question for you, and we will get an answer.
Yep. Okay. And then allowable use of funds. So these are the things that you can use the funding for. Payroll costs, rent payments, utility payments. If you have scheduled mortgage payments, and keep in mind with this, with scheduled mortgage payments or also scheduled debt payment, if it was debt that was incurred by the business prior to February 15th, 2020. So you can make scheduled mortgage payments or scheduled debt payments if you incurred the debt prior to February 15th, 2020. But bear in mind with both of those that you're not allowed to use the funding for prepayment. So in other words, you can pay the amount that's due, but you cannot use the funds to prepay on either your mortgage or any other debt that you've incurred for the business. And then it can also be used for worker protection expenditures, things related to things that your entity would purchase for the safety and protection of your workers. Payments to independent contractors are allowed as long as they do not exceed 100,000 in annual compensation for contractors. Any other ordinary and necessary business expenses, including maintenance costs, could be included. Administrative costs, including fees and licensing. State and local taxes and fees are eligible. Operating leases in effect as of February 15th, 2020. You can also use it for insurance payments, and then you can use it for advertising, production, transportation, and capital expenditures related to actually producing performances, theatrical or live performing arts productions. This can't be the primary use of funds, but this is an eligible use for the funds. Things that are not allowed, you cannot use the funds to buy real estate. You can't use it to make payments on any loans you originated after February 15th, 2020. So essentially any debt that you incurred after the pandemic started would not be eligible to fall under this. You can't use it to make investments or loans to others. You can't use it toward contributions or other payments to or on behalf of political parties, political committees or candidates for election, or any other use prohibited by the administrator. So again, this is something that as you're going through this, and we're going to talk a little bit later in the presentation about the budget and some different aspects of what you have to do to complete this application. But if you're not sure about any of the expenses, we're here to help you. And if we're not sure ourselves, we will find out if it's something that you can use the funding for or not. And so then before completing the application, you have to register in the federal government system for award management. That's sam.gov. You have to sign up for updates at the application portal for this, which is the svograntportal.sba.gov. You have to complete SBA form 3415. And then also there's an application checklist with other required forms and documents that you will need. And there's an FAQ section that you can access through the portal to help you as you get ready to apply and determine what you need. So at this point, we are going to go into a little bit more how you actually register in SAM and get set up to do this application. And so for that, I am going to turn it over to Jim Johnson, who is the South Carolina State Region Director, who is based in Orangeburg. Jim?
Okay, thanks, Paul. So once you have determined eligibility and you think you can apply for this grant, then you're going to have to do a couple things. You're going to have to do some registration. The SBA is not generally a grant organization. They usually loan money or guarantee loans. So this is kind of something new for the SBA. So you don't see a whole lot of, they haven't seen a whole lot of this. So they're trying to invent a new system, so to speak. So with a lot of federal grants, with the USDA in particular, and other federal entities, you have to go through the SAM system, basically, to be reimbursed. And you have to have a couple other registrations in place. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about SAM to begin with, Systems for Award Management. This system is required, is a required registration to apply for this particular grant. It's focused on entities registering solely for federal financial assistance, and that's at sam.gov. So what is it? All entities, people, or organizations wishing to do business with the federal government must register in the System for Awards Management, SAM. Businesses and grants businesses and grant or loan recipients must have an active SAM registration to receive federal funds. So this is going to be a hurdle that you're going to have to get through in order to, apply for this grant. Without this number, you're not going to be able to apply. So this is a pretty important section. Registrations must be updated every 12 months to remain active. There is no fee to register or renew at sam.gov. If you just went to Google sam.gov or SAM, you might actually get a couple of things that pop up on your Google returns that say, hey, we can help you with registration, and we can help you get your numbers. And then you go into, and of course they say it's going to be a $500 fee or a $1,500 fee. It's free. So you can just ignore those. It's a process that most people can do fairly easy. If you have trouble, SBDC consultants would be happy to step you through the process, but just don't pay for this process. There's no fee. And new registrations can take 7 to 10 days to process as information is validated. Now, I can say that I've helped a lot of folks, get the SAM registration, and it's taken, as short as a couple days, but I have seen it take as long as 7 to 10 days. And if the traffic volume is really high, or if there's an issue, you need to accommodate for that period of time as well. So just to expect at least 10 days, just to be safe. So how the government uses sam.gov. So SAM collects entity data for grants officials' use. Some of this data includes your unique entity identifier, which is your DUNS number. And we'll talk about that more in detail. Your entity banking information. So you're going to need your routing and banking information when you register. Your taxpayer identification number, also known, some people know it as the EIN number. Your assigned cage code, which will be assigned to you if you don't already have one. And it can take up to 10 days to receive a cage code. Essentially, when you register for SAM, you will get a cage code. And when you initially start the registration process, it's going to search to see if you're already in the system. So for some reason, if you registered a long time ago and you forgot about it, or you recently registered, you might be in there. So you'll search. If you're in there, then you can go in and just update your account, and you would already have a cage code. Otherwise, they'll assign you one. And then there's representations and certifications and validation of entity uniqueness. So I mentioned the DUNS number. Prior to registering in SAM, you really need to have all your information available that I just mentioned. Like if you have your EIN determination letter that you received, which has the business name and address, I would try to retrieve that. And then if you have a DUNS number, go ahead and get your DUNS number. If you do not have a DUNS number, or if you don't know if you have a DUNS number, you can, when you go to DUNS, you can look it up. So there's kind of a couple different ways to approach getting DUNS. I mean, you can go to dmb.com site, which takes you to their general, screen. And if you go to the DMB site, you're going to want to basically obtain a new DUNS number, and then it'll ask you a couple questions. The answer that you want, or the question that you're looking to answer, is that you're trying to get a DUNS number for the purposes of government contracting or being a grantee. Because DUNS, there can be a charge to DUNS if you go down the wrong avenue. So make sure that you're doing it for the purposes of contracting or obtaining a grant. Also, there's another direct way that you can get to the DUNS site, which is fedgov.dmb.com. That takes you directly to the contracting grant portal for DUNS. So DUNS should be free. DUNS stands for Dun & Bradstreet. You would select the link to request your DUNS number via the web. I just mentioned a couple of ways you can get there. Follow the on-screen instructions to check whether your business or organization already has a DUNS number. Again, it's going to make you do that in the beginning. So you'll understand, after you've written and put your name in there, whether you have a DUNS or not. If you do, go ahead and select that, make sure all the information is updated and correct. If you don't, then, you can get a new DUNS number. New DUNS numbers can be created in a day, according to the SBA. But again, through my experience, if you run into problems, it could take as long as a week. I've seen it take to get a DUNS number. And sometimes the issue might lie in, if you got the same business name as somebody else, you can still get the number. It just might take them longer to process it if something comes up. So, expect several days at least to get your DUNS number. But then again, I've seen it get, turned around real quickly as well. So requesting a new DUNS number, gather your documentation, as I explained. Some additional documentation that you're going to need. You're going to need 2 forms of acceptable documentation. And those forms are going to include like your Secretary of State articles of incorporation. When if you got an LLC or were incorporated, your EIN number or your tax identification number letter, confirmation letter, any lease agreements, utility bills, anything you can get, mortgage statements, different things like that. But it must show your correct legal name and physical address on that so they can match it up. And they're basically verifying you are who you say you are, and it's a unique entity. Sole proprietor's full legal name and current physical address. And then you submit documentation through the workflow, which essentially you just upload it. So you can take a picture with your phone, scan it, and then upload it right there on their site. It's pretty easy. Okay. Make sure all your information is correct. And I'll reiterate that point real quickly. You need to make sure that the information that you put in DUNS is the same as the information that you have on file with the IRS, and is the same as the information that you're going to put in SAM. It all needs to be the same. The names need to be the same. It needs to be worded right, exactly the same way. The address should match on all 3. And if there's anything different, SAM does something called a TIN match. And if it mismatches, then it's just going to slow the process. And then once you have to go in and try to make corrections, it could take a lot longer to do this process. So I just say ahead of time, make sure everything matches. Like your EIN name is the same as DUNS, it's the same as SAM, and all your addresses as well. Okay. So that's done. So you went in, you registered for DUNS, you got your DUNS number, you're excited. Now you get to go over to SAM and start working on SAM registration. So you're going to go to sam.gov. And the first thing you're going to do is get a login.gov user account. And there is also a SAM registration video. I believe that Sarah might be able to send out that video. If that's not the case, you can go on SBA's website and see a video about how you can register with SAM. But the first thing you have to do is go to login.gov, user account. So you're basically creating an account, and you're going to enter your email address. You need to have a working mobile phone number because they're going to do 2-factor authentication as you set up this account. So now that you've got your SAM or your login.gov account set up, now you can go in and what you need to know for sam.gov registration, and you can go in and register. So what are you registering? Response, I only want to apply for federal assistance opportunities like grants, loans, and other financial assistance programs. You're going to need ownership information. Again, you're going to need bank account information, executive compensation information as required. That executive compensation is really for like really big companies, like 25 million and over. There's some other, details, but it probably doesn't apply to most small businesses, but they would have a descriptor in there to let you know if you need to do that. You're going to need your DUNS number. You're going to need your tax identification number or your EIN. You're going to need a cage or cage code. If you do not have one, one will be assigned to you during the registration process. You're going to need a notarized letter to grant access for new applications. And this is going to come after. You don't need that initially, but eventually you'll need that. And you should review required representations and certifications. So, I think, is that the last slide?
Yes.
Sam? I think
Yes.
it might be. Okay, well, go back one. I want to say one more last thing before we move on to the next part. So once you've gone into SAM and you have all this information available and you've gone through it, again, just if you get stuck, just go ahead and give us a call if you're unsure. You can contact the SBDC. You know, a lot of us folks have gone through the process many times. It shouldn't be too challenging. It's pretty straightforward. Just like I said, the biggest thing that trips people up is a mismatch in the names, in the identification numbers, and to highlight once again that notarized letter. That's something that needs to come out like within 60 days of your application. So you have a little time to get that out, and we can get you instructions, and the SBA and Sam will give you instructions whenever you apply on how to get that letter out. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Ben Greenswick.
Great. Thank you, Jim. All right, so we're going to move on to SVOG application required documents. Oh, by the way, sorry, I'm Ben Greenswig. I'm an SBDC Cares consultant out of Winthrop University. These are all the documents you should absolutely start preparing now: background documents, financial documents, forms. These are things like your taxes if you file K1s, for example, past 2 years of tax returns. We heard articles of incorporation, P&L, bank statements. I would just start gathering that information now, because there's going to be a pretty large demand on this information. You see an example of some of the documents you need. The written statement of need, I believe we have an example of it at the end of this webinar, but it's a 1 or 2 sentence affirmation that basically says that you have been disadvantaged by the pandemic and you require assistance. Again, there's an example. It is that simple. You see some examples of the corporate documents, obviously a photo ID, an employee list of everyone that you have, both full and part-time, and if you're a nonprofit, tax exempt status letter. So these are all the documents we highly recommend you start collecting now. The next slide, I believe, yep, this is the sample statement of need. Again, it doesn't have to be complicated. You can copy and paste this almost word for word, just change the relevant points. This is all the SBA requires on the statement of need. Diving a little bit more into the financial documents, I don't know how many of you have filed your 2020s. Obviously, there's an extension this year. So if you have filed your 2020s, definitely your 19s. If you haven't filed your 2020s, I'd also get your 18s ready as well. You need your quarterly income statements and a copy of your most recent financial statements. This is pretty important here to know the difference on an audited financial statement. If you're getting your taxes done, certainly with your CPA or really anyone, it will be an audit. It will be a financial statement. An audited statement is something that's a little bit different, and due to the size of these grants, that is going to be something that is required. So again, a standard. Some of you might be asking, is a standard tax return or a standard statement audited? The answer is no. A separate statement that is audited is going to be required, and your accountant can provide that for you. There might be an extra fee attached to that, but again, I would have that conversation with whoever files your paperwork. And And then payroll statements, cost rate agreements. Again, these are all things you should start gathering, beginning. This is important, by the way, this last point, as someone who's been involved in my own company's PPP applications. Know when you pay payroll. It says that it has to cover February 29th. For some of you, that might be a February 15th to 29th payroll statement. For some of you, that might be a March 1st to a March 15th payroll. It depends on if you're semi-weekly, bi-weekly, or how you pay. So just make sure that it covers through February 29th, 2020. And again, we could help out if you have any questions on that one. Here, again, more sort of standard forms. Again, you'll see the list here. Some of this is pretty commonplace certification regarding lobbying. You're not a lobbying organization. You're a certified drug-free workplace. And again, these are forms that can all be easily found, and forms that when you get a copy of this presentation, you can simply look up on your own. This is again. Oh, I see that there is a correction on audits coming up. Rebecca or Sarah, do you want me to read this coming out, or should I just move forward here?
I can read it.
Okay,
the question is, will the SBA require audited financial statements as part of the shuttered venues application? And the answer was no, an audited financial statement is not required to apply for an SVOG award. However, where a for-profit SVOG grantee expends more than $750,000 in federal funding in one fiscal year, it will have the option of either providing a single audit act audit or submitting an audited financial statement for that fiscal year during the audit period.
All right, so brand new updated guidance. So if it's under $750,000, you do not need an audited financial statement. If it is above, you will have audit options. So thank you for the real-time update. This stuff does change, so that's why we're here. But please be mindful that the $750,000 is your audit versus non-audit threshold. All right, moving right along beyond standard forms here. This is where we're going to talk a little about applicant-specific documents. So if we can just kick on to the next one. Yep. So for venue operators, a floor plan, some kind of outline on what the capacity, what the outline is. I mean, what they're looking for are the definitions of what a venue is. For example, they need fixed seating. An exception is that if you have risers that go in and out, that also does qualify, but they need to see that on a floor plan. Obviously, they want to see that they have, where the lighting, where the lighting rigs, and there's an asterisk there as well, which we'll get to, public address system. They basically want to know, if they've never stepped foot into your venue and they're looking at your plan, that it is, that a reasonable individual will easily deduce that it is in fact a venue in operation. If you are a promoter or a producer of live performing arts, you do need a list of those venues between January 19 and February 29, 2020. So I would, out of an abundance of caution, I would come up with some kind of spreadsheet. I would have the name of the venue and then the address of the venue. And in fact, if you want to go a little bit above and beyond, then maybe even the website as well. Again, you are talking to individuals that need to trust you from what they're reading, that it is in fact a live venue, or you are a promoter or producer of live performing arts. If you, this is a little bit more specific. So again, if you are a promoter, producer, marketing materials, so you want to create some folders of your promotions, showtimes, prices. We recognize that this could be PDFs. It could be screenshots of your banner advertisements. If you have advertising, you see printed or social media posts. So you don't need to find your original post. If you want to search on it, you can take a screenshot and then you can start saving those as well. For box office and ticketing reports, again, the dates, the prices, the number of tickets sold for all February 2020 performance. And please pay special note here on the bottom. If your venue was in operation, but you had no performances in February 2020, maybe you're seasonal, then you must do 1 month from January 19 and January 20. So pick any month in that 12-month period to showcase the ticketing, reporting, artist information that you have. So we're going to go into museums. Again, for the next slide, that'll be floor plans. There was some questions around outdoor spaces. So if there are plans of the ground, if we can just flip onto that next slide, please. If you could have floor plans, nope, other way. We're gonna go back to the museum. Nope, other way. Yep, there we go. All right, thank you. So this is also really important, especially for those of you that have outdoor performance, outdoor exhibits. Again, floor plan is important. But you also want a copy of any COVID-19 related occupancy restrictions, 25% capacity, 50% capacity, 10% capacity, what those actual restrictions are and when they're in place. So in the form of notices. If you don't have them, you can most likely just simply search Google, your county, your state, your city, depending on where you are, COVID-19 occupancy restrictions, and you will find some of the archived notices there as well. So this is important too. All right, so this is important if you represent talent. You're going to want the agreements. Now, I would encourage you to just be aware if anything is under a non-disclosure, if anything has to be, if you're under an obligation to redact or black out anything, just be mindful of that. Some contracts do have that. So again, if that is you, then I recommend reaching out to one of us and we can try to figure out if you have to send something that's non-redacted or redacted. But definitely the agreements. And then of course, the list of all the acts, people you've signed, where they were, include the performances and denote the performances that were canceled due to COVID-19. So that is really important as well, because there you're going to have more evidence to show your harm. All right. And I think this is my last one here. So these are your due dates. Okay, so this is important. Applications are accepted on a rolling basis, mean please, go ahead as soon as it opens up, submit. However, there are two factors you need to be aware of. Factor number one, it is first come, first served in terms of when your application is received, but the SBA will be distributing their funding based on a priority phase. So depending on your risk, depending on how your profile is evaluated by the SBA, you might get all your money at once if you are approved. You might get your money in installments. So this will be known a little bit more. Certainly once you apply, it's a portal you can log in and check your status. But we do highly recommend, if you qualify or if you think you qualify, to apply. Do not wait for a phase, do not wait for a status. Just apply and get that information in there. And then grants will be awarded until all their funds are obligated. So that is the application. Again, early bird will catch the worm here for these grants. And I think that is the end of my presentation. I'm going to hand. Oh,
there is one question regarding some of the information you just covered. What if the person is a singer and they represent themselves? Are they eligible?
That's a really good question. If a singer who represents themselves, I think in that case, and I would recommend you certainly reach out to me or whoever, and I'll help to get you that specific answer. I'm pretty certain if you represent yourself, that, well, I guess it would be if you. I'm gonna have to get back to you, but I don't think self-representation counts because you're not booking other talent. You're just booking yourself, but don't take that as gospel. Please reach out. Let us share your details, and we will certainly get you that information for sure and clarify that.
Thanks, BG. I'm going to pick it up from here.
Oh, thank you, Ben. From one Ben
Yes,
to
sir.
another, all yours.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And appreciate the opportunity, guys. Really appreciate you guys on the call that zoomed in with us. And we're coming down the home stretch now. So if you would hang on, we've got some basic information on the application process, but there's a couple of heads up that I really need to give you as we come down the stretch. It could be very beneficial to you. So beginning with the basic application, just a quick overview of the process. You will create an account in an applications portal. You'll see the address on the slides, and as Rebecca had indicated on the front end, each attendee will receive a copy of our presentation following our presentation here this afternoon. So you'll create an account, SVO grantportal.sba.gov. That is not case sensitive. You could also Google that, and the link is up. I would point out that the portal is set to go live for application processing as of this week, April the 8th. And so, but if you want to jump in early, I would encourage you to go ahead and do that. I was in earlier this morning. They will actually allow you, before they open the portal up, to put your basic email and contact information in. It takes you about 60 seconds to do that. And then they'll give you an email heads up as soon as they open that portal. So you may want to go ahead and do that as soon as you can when we complete our call. You would also then enter your basic information in the portal as far as the application process is concerned once that portal does open. And again, it's slated to open this week, April the 8th. You would also complement that application by uploading all required and applicable documents. You'll see that you could use PDF, JPEG, Excel, or Word doc formats. Along those lines would be some options that you would have. So that should be a fairly easy lift for you guys. The application documents are saved throughout the process to make it kind of what I call bin proof. So that should really help you in case you have a temporary shortage on your connection. Applications, this is a really important heads up, guys. Applications not received will not be received by the SBA until submitted. So, you know, you'll get to the end of this thing, and you're going to make sure you've got everything that you need that's required. And then you want to make double sure you do hit the submit button. Okay, if not, it would have been akin to dropping the ball before you completed your task, and you'll be waiting on somebody that's quite honestly has no idea you're waiting on them. SBA staff are not permitted to provide assistance. However, as Rebecca said on the front end, we could be your new best friend along these lines. So the basic application process is fairly straightforward, and that leads us to a brief discussion then of the proposed award amount. A proposed award amount will be automatically calculated based on the financial information that's entered through the application process. It's important for you to know this is a proposed award amount. The SBA is not bound by this proposed award amount. This is not a commitment that you would receive anything at this point in time, okay? So that's important that you would understand this. If for some reason you would not care for the entire amount as calculated per the proposed award amount, you may reduce that amount in the proposed budget. I would remind you this is a grant, and unless it was kind of a typo issue and there's no way you could spend the amount relative to the allowable expenditures, that would be the only reason I would see that you would go back and indicate you need less than the proposed award amount. But that would be the only caveat that I could know. Otherwise, you're probably good to go on this. The proposed award amount, a little more about that. Excuse me, that leads us to the requirement for a proposed budget of which you would you would need to fill out. And the proposed budget is going to really lay out how you would expend the grant funds if received. Each proposed expenditure must be entered on a line that corresponds to the allowable funding categories. Again, they tried to bin proof this a little bit. Those allowable uses of funds that our colleague Paul went over on the front end of our call, they'll be itemized as options on the proposed budget. And then you would simply enter the amounts that you're proposing to use per respective allowed expenditure. The proposed budget must coincide, must include only proposed expenditures for grant funds. If you're looking to complement with other sources, do not include those other sources. In other words, only proposed expenditures relative to the grant would need to be part of this quote proposed budget. The proposed budget cannot exceed the proposed award amount that you were given. Again, that would have been facilitated through the standard application process. And you need to make sure you note that. If an applicant received a PPP loan after the December 27th of last year date, the SBA will reduce the proposed budget by the amount of the PPP loan. You don't really need to make that adjustment on your proposed budget. That will, the SBA will take care of that. They've got a process in place that would take care of that automatically. We're going to do, as I conclude my remarks here in just a few moments with you guys, we're going to give you a kind of a side by comparison. If you're applying for the SVOG grant and you did receive a PPP loan or an EIDL loan, we're going to give you a little more information regarding those situations here in just a few minutes. So once the proposed budget is taken care of, the electronic, the submission is actually taken care of, or it should be electronically. Now, keep in mind, that's the way the SBA, who is administering this program, prefers. So again, if I'm requesting money, I'm going to try to do all I can to take care of things in the way that the one that's actually administering the process specifies. So the SBA specifies electronic submission of all of the application and all supporting materials, if at all possible. If for some reason that's not possible, they will consider a qualified exception. And I would encourage you again, if for some reason you don't have access to the infrastructure and support needed to make an electronic submission, lean on us. Let's see if we can help you mitigate that on the front end. And then if not, we can certainly assist you in moving forward regarding the request of an exemption from the electronic submission. Okay, so regarding your application status, again, it's not submitted. An application is not submitted until you officially submit the application. So from a standpoint, you want to make sure that you confirm the status is submitted, and they will give you a confirmation on that. In addition, the SBA will also notify you as an applicant of any status change regarding your application. You must log into the system, so make note of passwords that you use, username, etc. Make note of that. You're going to need to get in there and check your status. You may want to keep an eye on that and review that until you've seen an adjustment of status throughout the program or throughout the process that gets you to the end result. The thing I would want you, again, a second heads up, the status options that you're looking for, you need to see submitted on the front end. And then likely when you check in, you're probably going to see under review and then final review, and eventually a status of approved or denied. If you see an on hold, do not pay list status, that's a problem. And you're going to need to zero in on that. That's not going to take care of itself. There is a process for clearing out the status of on hold, do not pay. And so a heads up on that. If you catch that status, you'll want to make sure that that you're on point regarding those issues. The do not pay list is really an indication that a federal agency cannot do business with you, quite honestly. So again, this would not go away by itself. You'll need to follow a process. You'll have 30 days. And I think on the next slide, we kind of get into the details on the do not pay list issues, but you're going to have 30 days to clear this out. And again, this will not take care of itself. So heads up, this is a status you do not want to see. If you do see, you need to be intentional and proactive. Jump on this. You've only got 30 days to clear this up. There will be a protocol for you to follow, and you're going to need to clear that up regarding that status to get off the do not pay list status, such that you can be considered for the grant if that particular path, if you find yourself on that particular path relative to a status. If the application does not clear the do not pay list hold within 30 days, the application by default will be declined. So that's something you just want to make sure that that's likely not going to happen to you. But if it does, it's something that you can't just wish away. You'll need to jump on that. Most of you will work through the process, and again, your status will be submitted. It'll probably be in process and final process, and then you'll get an approved or declined status on the to conclude your status through the process. If you're approved, you will get a notice of award. So let's talk about the good stuff here. So a notice of award will come. It's going to basically include the terms and conditions of the grant. Those terms will include the project period. It'll reinforce that the project and the budget periods are 1 year from the date of the notice. Okay, so it kind of tells you, and it'll give you the fine print on that exactly when that 1 year clock begins to tick. It will specify the award amount, and it will also specify the approved budget, which it includes the list of expenditure allocations that you proposed that was approved. And again, Paul went over those options on the front end of the call. Don't fret about that. They're actually embedded as category options in your proposed budget, and then you'll have them lined item with their specific allocations in the final approved budget. So you're going to have everything you need to manage this appropriately. The notice of award will also include special conditions. This would be information regarding disbursements, the requirement to submit 2020 taxes if you haven't submitted that already. There could be other conditions based on application information. And most of you that's taken out a loan, you've been through this process, or other grants, you've been through this process such that you may have some special conditions to meet. So the award may be subject to, in this case, you meeting specified conditions that would vary from one to the other, but just be on point, make sure you work through the specifications as required. And then you must sign and upload. Heads up, you're almost at the goal line at this point, guys. You've got the notice of award. It lays out the terms. You've got the special conditions you've got to meet. And then do not fail. This would be akin to fumbling on the goal line, for goodness sake. You've got to sign off on this thing and upload it as specified to make this thing happen for you. So those are some of the details on the notice of award. From a post-award consideration standpoint, there are going to be some program-specific assurances that the administrators of the program are going to offer. You'll have that in what I would refer to as some of the fine print. You'll also be indicating that when you signed off, that you're providing some assurances. Again, that's what I would refer to as some of the fine print. It works both ways, but it'll be clearly spelled out for you. In addition, you would have budget information that would be germane to how you would fulfill your obligations regarding the grant commitment. The grant disbursement protocol will be clearly laid out and defined such that you'll be able to manage, you and your team will be able to manage this appropriately. And then information regarding the options of actually expending the funds of the grant will be reinforced relative to the post-award considerations. So with that said, I would just say to you guys to keep in mind as you move forward, once you've got the award closed out, once you've got everything taken care of, that there will be some requirements to officially close the grant, and just as requirements for closing any other grant or any other loan or any loan, mind you. So again, It's just part of the process, but that will need to happen before disbursement. There would be some record keeping and monitoring protocol that would be that you will need to have in place. Again, you'll have the heads up on that, the specifications for it, but it's something that you're going to have to manage on your end. And we want to make sure you're up to speed on it. The internal audits and the external audit triggers per the grant amount that my colleague BG went over earlier, that will be spelled out relative to your particular situation. So you'll have everything you need to successfully manage and properly manage the grant before your intake. And finally, there'll be some enforcement action language. You were talking about some carrots on the front end, do all you need to do, and it might be a little cumbersome for you, but work through it. We're going to be here to help you. That's the carrot, but also there's a stick involved, and you'll see the language on that provided per the SBA of things that might hold, that you may be held accountable for. So make sure you're on point there. Okay, as we're wrapping up, as I promised earlier, so what if you're saying, hey, Ben, what if I took out a PPP loan? What was that date? What if it was before that date of December 27th versus after? And you didn't say anything about if somebody took an idle loan out before. So we provided the latest from the SBA. This is the SBA's PPP Shuttered Venue Operators Grant recipient and COVID idle recipient matrix. So if you follow with me, as Sarah is highlighted in the middle column, we're just going to follow it straight down. Shuttered Venue Operators Grant applicant. Okay, if you're applying for this grant, and again, that's you guys that are zooming in with us, that's where we're at, and you received a PPP. Well, you may apply for the grant if you received a PPP loan prior to applying for the SVOG. If the PPP loan was received on or after December 27th of 2020, the amount will be deducted from the SVOG by the SBA in that proposed budget. All right. So again, you don't really need to do that. You just need to make a mental note that's going to happen. Okay. Now, what if you're received this particular grant? Would you be able to apply for future Shuttered Venue Operator grants as well? Yes, you may be eligible to receive a supplemental SVOG award as well. And again, there would be information forward that would be looking forward into the future of sharing with you guys on what that may entail. Okay, final option here, or final scenario, if you were. You're applying for the SVOG grant and you received a COVID-19 idle loan. You may apply for the SVOG grant in that case, but you cannot use the SVOG grant funds for the same specific costs as the idle funds. There's some overlap in the categories allowed, but you cannot double dip. So you want to make sure you've got spelled out clearly in your record keeping the dates that you covered, which expenditures from what source of funds, such that you would be in compliance if challenged on those issues. So again, this is one slide. You're going to get this slide. You also have access to us as well. And, you know, it's really, hopefully this clears up a little bit of the muddiness of some of the questions that we've had. So with that said, really appreciate you guys zooming in. We look forward to the opportunity of serving you. I would say on these things for you guys that received the award, that sounded like a great opportunity to get the band back together again. We're going to have a follow-up for you guys and really drill into what you need to do. So again, we're going to walk you by the hand if we need to, or if you'd like us to, it'd be an honor to do that. So Rebecca and Sarah will have some information on that forward looking. With that said, I'll yield to our host, Rebecca. Thanks for the opportunity, guys. Good luck to you.
All right. Thank you, Ben. And just like Ben mentioned, this purpose of today's webinar was to walk you through the basic application process for the SVOG grant. And we do intend to do a more in-depth follow-up webinar on what to do after you receive an award and some of those grant closeout requirements and audit information on that. Like we mentioned at the beginning of today's presentation, this webinar has been recorded. Each registrant will receive a copy of the slides from the presentation and a recording of the presentation. I would like to remind you that attending this webinar makes you an SBDC client, and with that, you can receive no-cost one-on-one consulting. If you need assistance walking through this application process or for any other matter in regards to your business, when you take a moment to complete the survey that will go out following this webinar, please indicate that you would like to speak to a consultant and we will reach out to you. I know that there are some specific questions regarding to your individual business that may not have been answered today. And if they haven't, we would love to be able to follow up with you on that and walk through your individual circumstances. There is a lot of information in this grant application process, and we can definitely help you with that. With that, thank you so much for attending the SBDC's Shuttered Venue Operators Grant webinar. If you have any questions, please ask us. We can definitely help. And we appreciate your attendance today. I hope everyone has a great rest of your Monday afternoon. Thank you.